Hi, my name is Marlene, and this is my story. All my life, I've been told the same story. Constantly, I remember having parties at my house, and my mom holding my head in her hand and telling me the same story over and over again. You are my miracle baby. But after she said that came the most heartbreaking, heart-wrenching thing that has ever been told to me. You're a product of rape, and your dad never wanted you, and he tried to kill you while you're in my stomach. He threw me downstairs, he would kick me in the stomach just so you wouldn't be born, because he never thought that you were his. But you're my miracle because you survived. That's what my mom told me time and time again my entire life. And I did survive. For the first 2 years of my life, I was raised by my aunt because my mom, she almost died, and it took her 2 years to get better. And when my mom got better, that was the proof that she gave me that my dad never wanted me, was that he didn't even raise me for the first 2 years of my life. And I don't even understand why she would tell me that, or how she would think that that would be something that would make me feel special. But she did. When I was 5 years old, my mom ended up moving myself and my older brother in with my stepdad, and that's when I began being molested. My older brother started molesting me, and pornography was introduced into my life. And from 5 years old until 13, I was sexually abused by my older brother. 5 years old, you're not understanding what is going on, just being forced to do awful, horrible, vile things, not only to my brother, but to his friends. And again, I'm a product of rape, and my dad tried to kill me. And I'm this miracle baby that supposedly is a miracle, and I'm supposed to be special, but yet I hate myself. I hate everything about myself. In junior high, I'm horribly bullied. My mom created this horrible thing, a way to discipline me, but she would have me lay in the bed, and she would beat me with a 2x4. Again, I'm supposed to be her miracle baby, so why is she doing this to me? In junior high, I started raging on myself because I hated myself so much. When I was in 9th grade, I went to my first house party, drank everything that was put in my face, and by God's grace, it didn't happen, but I was almost gang raped that day. Having men crawl on the bed and having a dresser being shoved in front of the door, hearing my friend's boyfriend break a window to come and save me. And you think that that would have stopped me, right? It didn't. All throughout high school, I partied. When the rave scene first started, I was constantly sneaking out of the house. I would push my car down the street so that my parents couldn't hear the car start. So I'd push the car down the street, and I'd pick up all my friends, and we'd go to raves. I'd change while I was driving. It was my life. I was working, had a nice car, had a good job, money, and everybody from the neighborhood was my friends. Everybody in my high school was my friends, and I married those two worlds together. So the drinking, the drugs, everything, it just all came clashing together. And again, it was my life. I no longer had to think of myself as that product of rape. I never had to think about the abuse I went through. I was able to create an identity for myself. I was no longer going to allow people to tell me what they thought of me, but I was going to show you who I am. And that's how I lived my life. And I ended up getting pregnant from one of the guys from the neighborhood. And in my world, if I just gave my daughter her father, then she would never go through any pain that I ever went through. when my daughter was 2 days shy of 2 months old, he broke 3 of her ribs in her back right side. And, my mom comes to the hospital and she's, screaming for me to give her my baby that she said, I knew that you were going to hurt her. I was already pregnant with my second daughter, and at that time, I just had no idea what to do. I was 19, by the time my second daughter was born. I had both of my kids when I was 18. And so here I am now having my daughter, and my second daughter's taken. I did 2 sets of parenting classes for 2.5 years. I spent thousands of dollars on counseling, doing everything that the court said I needed to do to get my children back. But in the end, my mom was behind the scenes lying and manipulating the court to make them believe that I never seen my children. So I lost parental rights to my kids. And I thought, again, I'm trying to grasp at something that seems never attainable. I joined the military, I joined the Army because I want to try to get my kids back that way. I ended up developing shin splints my second week of basic. They turned into stress fractures. By the time I was done with my training, I could barely walk. I ended up getting medically discharged a year later and come to find that my mom adopted my children. So now what? Now what's the purpose for my life? I went back again to the cute dresses, always in high heels, nails always done, hair is always perfect. Again, from the outside, it looks great. I'm working. I'm a productive member of society. But in the inside, I'm so dead. I went back to what I knew, just a little wine and I'll be fine. Like, I got to get through the day and then pop pills or smoke weed to go to sleep at night. And then I do it over and over again. I started dating somebody that I knew. He turned out to be one of the major drug suppliers for LA County that I lived in. And that was okay with me because he loved me. He used to tell me, I wake up in the morning just to make you smile. And I felt like he was my Prince Charming. And the first time that he hit me, I made an excuse. And he would tell me, just stop messing with me. And I would tell him, I don't know what I'm doing. So then he would ask me to let him discipline me, and I let him hit me. And then eventually it got to the point where there were no more words. Like, I'd find him just socking me in the face or jumping on top of me or choking me out or smothering me with a pillow. It was my life. For 4.5 years, that was my life. And I had opened up to him and I told him everything about my life. And it seemed like the more I told him, the more power he had over me and the more he used against me. One time he told me, I can kill you and bury you in the desert and no one would care because they never come looking for you. And he was right. It was so bad. And then on top of what he was doing, again, that broken record was playing in my head. I'm a product of rape. My dad tried to kill me. That same story just kept going. And I left him a lot. But I always went back because I had no one else. At the end of 4.5 years, I end up telling him, like, I can't fight with you anymore. I have a broken toe. I can't fight. And he told me to leave, so I walked 5 miles to my mom's house, and I asked her to call a victory outreach home. I told her I was gonna die. And she called them, and up until that point, I used to have Christians say, just ask Jesus into your heart and he'll forgive you. And that made me so angry. How could you tell me I need forgiveness? I didn't ask to be born into this world. I didn't ask for all that happened to me. How could you tell me I need forgiveness? But now here I am, sitting in this home completely broken. I have nothing. And now, when they told me I needed to ask Jesus into my heart, I did. And it was like for the first time I read God's word and it was telling my story. And I was still the same person, you know, I was saved, I wasn't sanctified. And I was starting fights. I was constantly fighting in the home. And I ended up leaving and I went back to my mom. She told me that my ex had been calling looking for me. She gave me makeup and clothes to wear to go see him. And I walked in the house and his son had a black eye. And I asked him what happened. And he said that I was no longer there and his son was messing with his head the way that I used to. I helped raise his kids for 4.5 years, and now his son is on the receiving end of what I was. So I ended up moving back in, and I was sober for 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks, and he begged me to get high with him because he wanted to love me. So I did, and I seen it happening all over again, and I just couldn't do it. And I remember we had just got a double-barrel shotgun, and I had just sawed it down myself and modified it. I had just bought 7-gauge rounds because they do more damage, and I was the only one who knew where it was. So he's tripping around the room, and I remember just climbing over the bed, grabbing the weapon, and sitting at the edge of the bed. And I looked right at him. I put the weapon in my mouth, and I looked at him, and he said, "You're not gonna do it." And I thought, why not now? Why not now? I have nothing, and I have nobody. I have nothing, and I have nobody. Why not? So I dropped my hands on my knees, and I cried out to the Lord, and I asked him for forgiveness, because I was done. I was so done. I said, God, if it's your will, let me into heaven. If not, let me stay here and I'll do your work. I mean, I had no idea what that meant. It's what the Lord had put on my heart. And I took the weapon, I took the safety out, and I put the weapon in my mouth and I pulled the trigger. So I was in a coma for 2.5, 3 weeks. And when I woke up from a coma, there was a nurse that was sitting there. She was by my bedside like every day that she was working. She even brought in like a radio with some worship music. She would read the Bible to me. And when I first woke up from a coma, I couldn't speak. I had a different trachea at the time, and it prevented me from speaking. And I remember I wrote down on a pad like what happened. And she started explaining to me like all the medical terminology of all that I had lost in my face. And I just stopped her because it was too much. And she said, you have lost 3/4 of your facial skeleton and 2/3 of the muscle and the tissue. And in that moment, I just remember and in that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came upon me. He says, your face is gonna be the door that I use to bring people to me. And, you know, I've had to hold on to that promise because I didn't wake up from a coma this completely changed person. You know, I'm still a product of rape. My dad still didn't want me. I was still horribly abused as a child, horribly bullied. I was still the same person. And then to add on top of everything, now I'm completely disfigured. The Lord knew what I needed to hear in that moment. I didn't see myself for another 2 weeks. And it's so funny because I walked by a mirror like every day. I just never looked at it. I never felt to look at it. And it wasn't until I was getting ready to leave the hospital did the nurses and the doctors and psychiatrists and my entire patient room, or what's it called, the room was filled with people. And they're now going to reveal myself to me, right? And they're sitting there waiting for this response. And they lift the mirror up, and I see what I did. And the Lord spoke to my heart again, your face is going to be the door that I use to bring people to me. And it was like, okay. I couldn't speak for almost the first year. I had nowhere else to go but with my older brother. So I moved in with him and his family. And he was horribly abusing his wife, and his children were terrified of him. And I had to sign over power of attorney to him because I couldn't speak. And I remember sitting there with my Bible saying, God, teach me something. Teach me what I need to learn so I can get out of here. And the very first promise he gave me was Jeremiah 29:11. And in context, the children of Israel were still in bondage. Their bondage had just begun, and yet God's already promising them a glorious future. And in that moment, I knew, okay, God, this is the beginning of that journey, and your plans for me are good, and your thoughts toward me are good, and I'm going to do what your word says and nothing else. In that moment, I knew this is it. This is it. And God has been faithful to walk with me down this road, and it's not been easy, and it really has not been pretty, but he's brought me through so much healing. You know, for every story I was told, for every awful, horrible, vile, disgusting thing that was done to me, God has given me a word. He has given me a promise. He has given me victory over every pain. And I know that I have people that say, God delivered me from this. But I have a God who's faithful to me, and he has not delivered me from anything. He has walked with me through that valley to the victory. I love Joshua, how he says, the angel of the Lord will go before you, and he will prepare that ground for you. And that's what he's done in my life. Every step of the way, he has gone before me, behind me. His hand of blessing has been upon me. And that's my life. You know, every scar that I have, every memory that sometimes overtakes me, it's no longer mine. It doesn't belong to me. It's for God. You know, I took my life that day. I should not have survived. I took my life. And the life that I live now is for the glory of God. And that's why my Instagram page is called Face for Glory. My life, my face is to bring him glory.